Jeff, and I'm so honored to be here with this panel of experts on disability issues today. I'm Tara Keene. I'm the president and CEO of Community Connections. And I just wanted to start by going around and allowing everyone who's on the panel to introduce yourselves. So Katie, do you want to kick it off?
Hi, I'm Katie. I have been with Community Connections for at least a year now, and I love everything about it. It's been a godsend to me.
Thanks, Katie. Well, Richard. Richard is on the board of directors. Yep. Great, and we're so glad to have you representing a lot of people with disabilities on our board. All right, Alyssa.
What am I supposed to say?
What do you want to say, Alyssa? Introduce yourself.
I'm Alyssa Beck, and I've been with Community Connections since 2019, and I love doing the virtual day program, and it's been very fun, and I have made lots of friends on it.
Great, we're glad you're with us today, Alyssa.
Right.
And Jeff.
Hi, I'm Jeff Newman, and I started with Community Connections as a board member back in 2013, and actually became an employee and stepped off the board into being an employee at 2015. And I currently work with Community Connections as the Director of Community Integration.
Doing this together. What was that, Richard?
Yeah, Holly House is opening. Easing back into it.
All right.
What was that, Richard?
Can you talk about Holly House?
Talk about Holly House. You miss everybody? Yeah, it's been a long year. Absolutely. People have been pretty isolated. It's good to be back. It is good to be back. Yeah, I'm glad things are getting back to normal too, Richard. Well, Richard, do you want to start us out on our next question, which is, could you tell us a little bit about your disabilities?
You have a handicap. Cerebral palsy.
Great. Anything else you want us to know about that? Come back to me. Come back to you? All right. Yeah, we have plenty more questions for you. All right. Who would like to field that question next? Anybody else want to tell us a little bit about your disability? Jeff?
Yeah, so when I think of my disability, the primary thing that comes to mind is that I'm autistic. In the I don't consider them disabilities now, but they definitely have been at different points in my life. I've got a migraine condition that's pretty well controlled now, but in the past, I've had the same migraine for 4 months, and that was definitely disabling. And so, you know, sometimes there's sometimes for us to ask on any given day what our disabilities are, and you may get a different answer, and that's true for me.
Yeah, that's quite valid. Alyssa or Katie, either of you want to share on this question? And you can pass on any of these questions.
Pass.
All right. Alyssa?
I'll go. I have autism and cerebral palsy. And just like Jeff, I'm autistic too.
Yep. And just like Richard.
Oh, and I'm also in a wheelchair too.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing, giving us that context. So, how do disabilities and having disabilities impact your life?
Oh.
And anyone can go first.
Okay, I'll go get us warmed up here. How do disabilities impact my life? You know, I would say the primary way my life has been impacted by disability is less about the disability and more about how people have treated me because of the disability. And spoiler alert, the way people have treated me is generally bad. From well before the point that I understood that I had a disability. Generally got treated not well at all. Got excluded from a lot of things, got bullied in a lot of ways. But, you know, my disability leads me to need to kind of, I have a different brain, and my brain processes things differently. And so in a lot of ways that can be positive, but sometimes not so much. I commonly have to put a lot more effort into decoding and figuring out social situations. There's a lot of ways that I can be overwhelmed by the sensory input, what's coming, what I am hearing and what I am seeing, and definitely what I am feeling as well, especially with stuff like clothes. You see me, I'm almost always wearing 100% cotton because that's what I'm comfortable
Melissa, I saw you nodding a lot while Jeff was talking. Have you had some of the same experiences?
Oh, my disability affects me, but I have to depend on people for things because it's hard for me to do stuff for myself. And I also have sensory issues.
Talk more about that.
I can't stand to have my teeth brushed and to have my feet touched.
So what do you do
Certain
about that?
noises bother me too. I startle easily.
Yeah.
Good to know. Thanks for sharing, Alyssa.
Yeah.
Katie?
A lot of people think that I'm not even disabled because they can't physically see it on me. And until they start talking to me for quite some time, or they're part of my family, they just think that I'm mooching off of the government and tell me that before I decide to get married or have kids, then I need to either be completely vaccinated and 100% like everybody else, or I need to just kill myself and not be around anymore. So I get death threats sometimes. I get told that any of my kids are automatically going to be
Disabled.
yeah, disabled and not like everybody else, and not even worth even trying to have. And that really hurts me because I want to be a mother. I want to have kids, and I know they're going to have struggles just like mine, but I'm going to have a better understanding of how they feel because I feel that same way. So I'll be able to recognize the signs, I hope, and get them tested, and hopefully their life will be a little bit better than mine. Because when I was growing up, if I got the answer wrong, I would get beaten with something until I got the answer right. And I don't want that with my children or anything like that. And to those people that think that I don't have a disability, it's just because it's invisible and you can't see it on me. But if you do talk to me for quite some time, if I automatically pause, and most people think I'm done talking. No, I'm not done talking. I'm trying to process what you asked me in a way that I can understand better in my own head. So I might need like 15, 20 minutes, maybe even an hour, or I'll gonna try to ask you, can you rephrase that? Because I don't understand what you're asking me. Don't just automatically assume that since you can't physically see a disability on me, that I need to start paying taxes and get off government programs because I don't need them, because I do.
Katie, sounds like you've had some of the same experiences as Jeff, where what's really impacted you is the way people treat you and the terrible things that they say.
Yeah, I can't believe that I got a death threat just because I was doing well in high school, but yeah, I was still in resource classes. But since I was doing well because I was in resource classes, I can't believe that I was told to, because I was on the second floor and doing better than the people that were in the resource classes, that I was too smart for this world. So I should just take a running leap and jump out the window because I'm too smart for this world, and that we already have too many smart people, so I should either kill myself or play dumb. And I did not appreciate that one bit.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Thanks for sharing that. What must have been really painful.
It was.
That
I cried all night long.
that reminds me of an experience I had where, and I was in high school, and it was right after my IEP for the year had come out and got distributed to teachers. And one of my teachers refused to honor my IEP and honor an accommodation on the IEP. And he made a big deal of it in class. And so what he said in class is, if Jeff wants to pretend, everybody wants to pretend to be the R word. And if Jeff wants to pretend to be the R word, then we're going to treat him like the R word. And I reported that teacher. There wasn't any question about what the teacher said. That teacher said it in front of an entire class of students. And there isn't any question about what the law says, because I had that IEP on paper, and there wasn't any disagreement about what it said. Did anything happen to that teacher? No. not one thing. Including I had to sit through that this was September of an entire school year, and I had to sit in that teacher's class for the remainder of the year. We don't get treated fairly.
Yeah, wow. It's a really sad story too. So Richard, do you have anything you want to share about how having a disability has impacted your life?
I have with autistic.
Can I get that one again?
I have with
You have a wheelchair, right? Does that make it hard for you to get some places in town?
yeah.
I would imagine.
Me too.
Alyssa, there's places you can't get into?
Yes.
Yeah. So your wheelchair helps you get around until there's a barrier.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's flip this around, and sounds like, yeah, disability has really impacted the way people have treated you in your life. How has disability been a positive thing in your life?
Well, for me, one of the major positive things is I'm living on my own for the first time, even though it is really scary and the most adult thing I've ever done. I'm still able, with the help of SSI, to pay my bills and to pay my rent on time and things. And I made quite a lot of friends here. And if it wasn't for Community Connections or Holly House, I would probably not be doing the things I'm doing, like this Subaru Love event. I probably wouldn't have known about that. Definitely would not have known about the Festival of Trees. So even though I can't really do majority of some stuff when it comes to living on my own, I can at least try to figure it out. And because with Community Connections and DSPs, and even my landlord, if I can't figure something out, if she knows how to do it, she'll either do it for me or do it with me and help me with it. And I really appreciate her so much for that. I love you, Audrey Fields.
Nice shout out. Thanks. Anyone else? How has disability been a positive thing?
Because I have a lot of friends now with Community Connections.
Yeah, Alyssa has learned how to lead classes and Zoom meetings, and you're a Zoom guru.
Yeah.
So one of the first things I think of when thinking about, like, just thinking in general, most disabled people that I know are also some of the most resilient people that I know. Because, you know, already just in this conversation, I've shared some examples of, you know, things in my life that I'm not exactly pleased about. And I know almost every disabled person that I've ever talked to has stories like that. And yet they're still here and they're still fighting. So resilience and tenacity are two things that I think most people with disabilities should take pride in, because it is real. Me personally, like, positive aspects of my disability, you know, I mentioned it's part of how my brain works, and, you know, part of the positives from that are that I've got a better memory than most people I know. I can self-teach myself a ton of stuff. And if I'm interested in it, I can probably learn more in a week than most people can in a lifetime. That's a powerful thing. And it's something I've relied on to get me. Yeah, Richard, I know you've got a great memory. I know we're like that way in a lot of ways. And, you know, another thing that's really positive is a positive aspect of disability is the power in being able to name the disability. Understanding that I am autistic is the most positive thing that has ever happened in my life, because it allowed me to understand myself, and it allowed me to stop beating myself up over the things I'm not necessarily good at. And that is what I was set up to do throughout, you know, throughout my life until I really understood who I was. And so there's plenty of people that would say, like, not wanting to associate with your disability. No, I went and hugged it because it allowed me to accept who I was in ways that I never could do.
So if people are watching today and think they might have a disability, think they might have autism or another disability, but haven't been diagnosed, what would you say to them? Do you have any advice?
People need volunteering.
People need social security. Some people,
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, that is definitely an advantage to getting a formal diagnosis is you will need that to, if you're seeking services, if you're seeking some form of support, that's often one of the things you need to do to get that support. Richard's very right. I mean, I can keep talking, but I'm leaving space for other people here, so.
I would also try to encourage them to be proud of who they are, whether they think they have a disability or not, because I'm trying to learn with my dyslexia that it's okay to get things wrong. It's okay to make mistakes because I'm only human. I'm not perfect. I'm going to make mistakes. And I'm still learning what my disability and my dyslexia is, because I wasn't told or tested until I was almost graduating from high school that I even have this disability. So I'm having to learn as an adult what my disability and my dyslexia actually is and how it really impacts me or doesn't. And I just want people to know that, yeah, we can still have a life. We can still do whatever we want to do. We just do it differently than other people do, and that's okay.
You know, benefits for getting formally diagnosed is it for a lot of people, they want to know that they're correct. You know, it is taking away the little voice in your head that may say, yeah, I think I'm this, but I may not be, and that's real for a lot of people. And if that sounds like you, I would encourage you to seek a diagnosis. I would also tell people that you know, there's a bunch of research about self-diagnosis, and you know, with the research that I'm most familiar with, which is self-diagnosis, where people believe self-diagnosis of autism, so people that believe they are autistic, but there's a lot of barriers to getting a formal diagnosis, especially with autism. Because one of the problems is there's a huge gender bias in the diagnostic criteria. So it's way easier for dudes like me to connect with a diagnosis. There's also barriers and financial barriers. and there are barriers just in stereotype. If you do not present as a kind of a Rain Man stereotype of autism, it may be harder for you to connect with a diagnosis. There's plenty of people, I know literally thousands of people that have gotten rejected and gotten, you know, their concerns that, or their feelings that they may be autistic dismissed because they make eye contact or they're quote too social. And so anyways, what research has indicated is about 3/4 of people that self-diagnose, when they do get connected with a professional, about 3/4 of people have that diagnosis confirmed. So about 3/4 of people that think they're autistic but have not been able to be formally diagnosed, when they eventually do, the professionals agree with them. So, you know, take that with, if you, research is indicating that if you think you are, there's a pretty good chance that you may be.
Yeah, that's a really large majority, 3/4. Yeah. So one of the stereotypes that we hear about people with disabilities is that people with disabilities aren't capable to make decisions in their lives.
Right.
Are we all capable to make decisions?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, that myth blown. So go ahead, Jeff.
You know, if I can just riff on that a little bit, we need to have conversations about decision-making ability around disability, especially around intellectual and developmental disabilities. But I know, like, almost every person with a physical disability will have experienced somebody assuming that they also can't make decisions. So this is broader, but the conversation needs to be around support to access information to make decisions, and respecting what we value in our lives and helping us connect with those valued experiences rather than what we are and are not capable of. Because whenever we're talking, we are underestimating the ability for people to be in control of their lives and having autonomy over their lives. And we're not focusing enough on how do we support somebody to think through the ramifications and potential risk of what is on the table, and make their own decision about what they want to do about that and how much risk they want to take. I know it's true, Richard, because I said it. Sorry, that's the ego talking.
I have a question.
Richard, you have a question.
What's your question?
I have people here disabled.
How many people are disabled?
Yeah.
Do you know the answer to that question, Richard? Did you say a few hundred?
Yeah.
It's probably higher than that. How about 1 in every 5 people?
Can you tell me why people are disabled?
The people at Holly House? Yeah.
Yeah,
have
people at Holly
disabilities.
House are disabled. Some people working at Holly House are disabled.
My friends.
They're your friends.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The friendships within our own community are really important. And I know there's kind of a focus on like, we should have non-disabled friends, and that's often a metric of integration. is how many non-disabled friends do we have. And it's definitely important that we have opportunities to have friends without disabilities, but the people that often get us best are the people that know what our life's been like and know what we've been through. And I have always felt more accepted by communities of people that think like me than anybody else. Has that been your experience, everybody?
Yeah. It seems more people with disabilities understand me a little bit better than people that don't have a disability, because they just assume that I'm going to be just like them until they actually try to have a conversation or ask me a really in-depth question and I can't answer it right away.
How about you, Alyssa?
What?
What do you think about having other friends with disabilities? Is that something you value that's important to you?
Yeah. It's important.
Yeah, sounds like that's 100% agreement with that one. So what are some of your strengths? I would love to hear, what are you good at? What are you really proud of? Richard is proud of Holly House. You really have a lot of leadership at Holly House.
People care about it. People care.
People do care. Yep, they care about you and you care about them has been what I've seen. That you are a very caring person, and you mentioned about your memory earlier, and you know so much about people and remember, you know, things that are important to them, and that really makes them feel special, Richard.
It does.
And you're on the board. Yeah.
I told you all of the time I'm born.
That's kind of how I remember it too. I think you did approach me and said that was something you'd be interested in, and the board was really excited to have you step up in that way.
I like everybody.
Is that another strength that you like everybody?
Yeah.
I think so.
Well, you know, I think it's okay. Tara set the tone of that we can talk about strengths in other people. And, you know, Richard, so a really cool thing I know about you is if you're listening to somebody, you are listening to somebody. I feel like everything I've ever told you, you remember. And, you know, if I tell you I'm doing something that weekend and I see you 3 weeks later, you're going to ask me how that thing was. You are an amazing listener.
Yeah.
And if I can talk about strengths of the rest of the panel, Alyssa, you are legit one of the funniest people I encounter on a daily basis. You are really witty, and we have a similar kind of dry, sarcastic type of humor, so I love it. And Katie, you have one of the biggest hearts of anybody I know.
Yeah, my family says that about me, and so have my friends. And I think that once we can start hugging people again, people will definitely, if they want it, they will definitely like a hug from me, because my mom and my aunts used to tell me all the time that I was like the best hugger, because I guess I taught myself from the womb to give the best hugs ever. And a lot of my friends, I will just hug them and they'll automatically stop crying and want to talk to me about what's bothering them. And sometimes they just need a hug, and then they're good after that. And I've been told by different people in the advocacy class, even though I don't realize I'm doing it, that I'm a really good advocacy leader for other people, but I don't even realize I'm doing it until people point it out to me and thank me for advocating for them. It's really hard to do because I don't even know I'm doing it until somebody tells me thank you for doing that for them.
One more time, Richard.
Good people.
You have good what with people?
With them.
You have good friendships with people, definitely.
Well, I would point out that Katie is an excellent public speaker, and I think she's demonstrating it here today. But the very first time I met Katie was at an ability summit that we co-hosted last year, right before COVID broke the world. And Katie got up and told her story and was just so clear and authentic. And she says she was nervous, but just her presence, you never would have known. You know, she might have been like one of those ducks that's paddling as fast as she can underneath the water, but man, on the surface, she was a total performer. Very impressive.
I didn't even know you were there.
I was, and you did a marvelous job. It was really impressive.
Thank you. I didn't even know you were there.
If you said it to the Lord, please.
Yeah, Richard was at the ability summit, weren't you?
Yeah.
I think I think that's the last time a lot of us saw each other in person.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, Jeff, what are some of your strengths?
Well, I mean, I talked a little bit about my memory. You know, for anybody listening in on this call, I'm a better mechanic than you are. You know, I've always been the person that can kind of take anything apart and fix it and put it back together. You know, one of the things I'm passionate about is I'm passionate about advocacy. You know, I know what motivates a lot of us to do advocate work is it's pretty common that we didn't exactly have great lives, and we don't want other people to have those experiences. And so when we can help change the narrative and help change kind of societal views and make other people's lives better, it's hugely validating, and it's definitely what motivates me.
Well, I would also point out people love when Jeff does trainings. He can show up at a staff meeting or do a person-centered training and people just eat it up. They want more. Jeff is an excellent teacher. And that's really a strength that we use a lot at Community Connections because he has a lot to offer.
if you said that, you're the Lord, please.
He is actually gonna come teach the board. That is planned for sometime this summer. So on the agenda.
You're the Lord, please.
Move forward, please. You want the next question?
Well, did Alyssa have a chance to share your strengths? I think Jeff shared some. Did you have a chance.
Oh, and I'm also good at hosting classes.
Yes, you
Yes, you
are.
are.
Alyssa
I
is
was
a
going to
good
point
teacher.
that out if you didn't.
Yes, she is. She's very good at that. And if she can't host a class, she gets kind of like fake sad, but able
Yeah.
to host a class, she's like extra excited and super happy.
Yes.
Well, what are some things that people assume about you that may or may not be true?
One of the main things that people assume about me that I really don't like is you're not even disabled, so why do you live at Cameron Square? That's only for people who are disabled, and you're not. And I'm like, okay, how many times do I have to see this? It's invisible, it's mental. You're not going to see it on me unless, gosh forbid, I get a horrible head injury, and then you can see it. But it's like, how many times do I have to try and say, oh, I really don't want to talk about this right now. This, why do you want to know about this? Because it's not really any of your business in a nice way. And it's just like, whether you realize that I'm able to live here or not, I know I am. And I'm grateful that I live here, because if I didn't live in a place like this with helping with paying the rent to live here and having my rent lowered with medical bills that I pay for and things like that, I would probably either be on the streets begging all the time, or I would still have to be living with my aunt and uncle, and which I would still like, but eventually I want to be out on my own, making my own decisions. And sometimes it feels like I can't make those decisions with them around, because they'll treat me like a dyslexic kid instead of an adult. And I know I'm dyslexic. I am also been diagnosed with anxiety and PTSD, but that was just what makes me me. And I'm trying to live with that. And with other people saying, oh, well, you're not going to be liked if you say what your disability is all the time. Well, phooey on you. If you don't like me, you don't like me. I'm going to try to like you whether you like me or not. And if it's not going to be worth my time and effort or my feelings, then phooey. Because I'm not going to take anybody else's BS anymore, because I'm trying to be a strong, independent person. And if you call on me and try to get me to lower my standards to fit into society, well, all I have to say to you is fudge and BS and leave me alone.
Well said.
Yay.
Anybody else? Things that people assume to get under your skin.
Alyssa, have you ever experienced that if people know you're autistic, they assume that you don't have feelings and don't care, that you're just like a robot?
Yes.
Yeah, because
And
we're clearly robots, right?
yeah.
Yeah, we don't have any sense of humor ever.
No.
I do.
And then when I used to have really bad meltdowns, they would assume that they were because I'm willful and being a brat. and I didn't like that at all.
Yeah. You know, a lot of people will confuse a meltdown with a tantrum, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it made me mad when people did that.
Does that still happen? People still do
Yeah,
that?
they still do.
I think speaking in general,
Mhm.
a really common assumption that I encounter all over the place is that being disabled is being perpetually childlike. So disabled people aren't interested in doing adult stuff, like maybe drinking or being in relationships or maybe using certain 4-letter words, and that we shouldn't do those things, even though every other adult around us is doing those things or doing some of those things, or choosing not to and people don't hassle them, where we get often really strong pressure not to do those things that we shouldn't want to. And
Wait, you're saying that people with intellectual disabilities can have a beer and go watch an R-rated movie?
yeah, and they can even have sex. And sometimes that results in
Wow.
children. And the world doesn't end.
You're blowing some minds right now, Jeff. Yeah, it's really a common assumption. What was that, Richard?
Well,
What else?
What else?
What
Well,
do you,
that's a question for you.
yeah, what do people assume about you, Richard?
people, people.
You do like people. Do you think sometimes people don't know that you like them?
Yeah,
Mhm.
I feel
You like people where? On the board. We do have a pretty good board right now. I have definitely seen people underestimate you, Richard.
yeah,
Assumptions I've seen.
Yeah, I only met Richard once at Holly House, and he's the sweetest person that I've ever known, because he was just opens his heart to anybody and everybody. And I haven't seen, but I've heard a lot of people take advantage of him because he does that, and I've experienced that also, because I try to like everyone that I come in contact with, and other people are like, oh, well, you're just too nice and sweet to people. That's why people want to not be friends with you. And I'm like, really? Because I have like a circle of friends that I hang out with a lot. And I have all my virtual friends. So it's like, assuming that just because we're disabled, people pity us. That's why they want to be friends with us. But that's not true. People want to be friends with us because we're nice. And there's some incidents that some people do want to be friends with us out of pity, but
I think good friends.
Yeah, they don't make good friends. And I think is because the fact that they want to bully others because they feel like they can't make any friends, so they're just going to become a bully. And because they become a bully, they think they're going to get friends that way. And sometimes they do, sometimes they get bullied themselves. And if they would just be true to who they are, people would be more respectful of them and receptive to them, and probably be drawn to, hey, this person's really cool and they don't have to be a bully to be popular. I want to go introduce myself to them and see if they want to be friends. And I think that the more people treat other nicely and with sugar, the more friends we're going to make. But the more bullying and bad treatment of people, it was just throwing vinegar on an open wound. And you're not going to make any friends. You're just going to get hurt. And if it wasn't for my grandmother teaching me with my disability, my dyslexia, that if I just throw as much vinegar out there, that I'm not going to have any friends. But if I try to be sweet and kind and just open up my heart and let people come to me, then I'll collect more honey and friends being nicer than I am going to try to be a bully and throw out vinegar at people.
I want to zoom us out a little bit. You know, we kind of talked about what people assumed about you personally. What if we take that back a little bit? And what are some of the myths about disability in general that you would want people to get rid of?
That we can't make our own decisions because we just said that we can. That we don't deserve to have families or children like a non-disabled person, because we do. We deserve to have anything and everything we want to have. That a lot of people are like, oh, pity the poor disabled person because they can't have kids, and if they do, they're going to be just like them or 10 to 20 times worse. And if God makes them that way, then the only thing that I'm going to do besides love them to death is figure out how I need to do that and how I need to help them by asking professionals, how do I raise my child to be a decent person, and how do I help them when they have like a meltdown or have a meltdown in public? If more people would ask questions instead of just assume and throw out labels at us, I think the more the world would understand about difference between disabled and what they like to call regular society.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Melissa, any myths about disability you want to debunk for us?
I think the myth about disabled people is that we're all called brats and we're all just doing it on purpose, and there's no reason for this meltdown. You're just a brat. Stop acting like that. That's
Yeah.
needs to go.
Yeah, when you're disabled, like Alyssa was saying,
Mhm.
a lot of times people don't really care the underlying reason why things have gotten so terrible for you that you feel like you have nothing you can do except kind of curl up in a ball on the floor. And there's a real reason for that. There's something that happened, but a lot of times the focus is on preventing you and stopping you from doing however you are reacting to the very real distress in your life instead of helping you stop the distress.
Yes.
So there's a lot of focus on behavior instead of what situation have we put this person in and not allowed them to leave, that is telling them they have no other options than to like either run away, hit somebody, yell, make a scene, meltdown. And that's there's a reason. There's almost always a reason. And it's often an incredible double standard in the things that people expect us to tolerate that they would never tolerate in their own life. If we're talking about other myths, some things I definitely want to, say for the cheap seats in the back is vaccines do not cause autism. Plenty of autistic people have in fact been involved in creating vaccines. So autistic people create vaccines. You got it backwards. Another thing I think is really important is, not all disabled people, in fact, I would say a very, very solid percentage of us have no interest in being cured. We would rather go about our lives and be accepted for who we are. Focusing on a cure is, a message that sends to a lot of us is that you think the world would be better if we didn't exist. And, even if there's benefits to a cure, that's not something that's happening. A lot of our disabilities, especially developmental disabilities, are based in genetics, based in stuff that happened when we were born. And it isn't going to change our lives. It is going to divert the focus from how to make our lives better to talking about how to prevent us from existing in the future. And that's not a pleasant conversation. You agree, Richard?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, because that's what people think, that, oh, I can just cure you of your learning disability and then you'll be able to live a full productive life. Hello, I'm living in my own place, paying my own bills, going where I need to go on the bus and stuff. And I'm living a productive life. I don't need to be cured because I don't have an illness per se. I just think differently because God made me a little bit different. And I think that's the one thing that is really special about me, is because I'm not a cookie cutter person. I'm made different because God made me different, to teach people that it's okay to be different and special. We don't need to be cookie cutter like everybody else.
Yeah.
Oh, I got a really good thing to say.
Hit us with it.
And just because people are disabled does not mean that they shouldn't be a part of society. They still are.
Right on.
Yeah.
They can also contribute to society quite a bit.
Well, can and do.
They have just as much right to live on this earth that other people do.
That is very true. That could be the theme of the talk today.
Yeah.
Another myth that I feel is really important to address is that people with disabilities have bad lives, have a low quality of life, things like that. Like, one of the first things I said in this conversation was that a lot of, how disability affects me is how other people treat me. And the extent that we have bad lives is the extent of societal treatment is just an enormous part of it, either actively hurting us, sidelining us, excluding us, or refusing to make accommodations and changes that would make life better for us. Forcing us to live in poverty to access support. It's tremendously unfair. is not something so many other groups would put up with for a second, but it's kind of an expectation that goes along with this, with disability. You need support, prove it, and prove it by, you know, losing the support you need to live if you're too successful, you run the peril of having your life completely thrown out of balance because you could lose the support. That is just not fair. So when, like, this presumption that being disabled means a low quality of life is only true to the extent that society is engineered through structural ableism that to be the case.
Absolutely.
And we shouldn't have to prove to other people that we have a good quality of life, whether we're disabled or not. We shouldn't have to prove ourselves to other people. But I have to do that like all the time, even with my family. Sometimes I have to prove that I can do this, or I have the support to do this, because I may want to get a job in childcare, and that requires for me to go to college in this state. And I want to pursue that one day, but my aunt says that I should get a different job that doesn't require me to go to college because I barely graduated high school. My diploma says adjusted on it. But that was my choice for it to say adjusted. I could have taken that math proficiency quiz as many times as I wanted to, but after I got up to 299 and I was supposed to get a 300 after like the fifth or sixth time, I finally just threw in the towel because they didn't give me that extra point. But that was my decision. And I will have support going to college because of the people that talked about how disability people can have support to go to college and stuff at that summit. So I can go to college and become a teacher's assistant at a child care, or even run my own daycare one day. I can do that if I want to, because CCI is going to give me the support to do it. But it's like, as soon as she said, oh, you can't do that, she's like taking her thumb and going and squishing.
I just want to point out a couple of really good points that you have made today that I want to make sure people take home. And one of those is, as you just said, if somebody with a disability tells you that they can do something, believe them.
Yeah.
Always assume that somebody can before you assume that they can't. Yeah, could I just finish this and then we'll move on, Richard?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the second thing that I'll just say really quickly that you said earlier that I want to make sure people remember is, if somebody tells you that they have a disability, they have a disability, right? There is no reason to question somebody who says they have a disability or who parks in accessible parking space.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason to question it,
Yep.
right?
Just like it would be uncool for me to ask to question somebody's gender, like Tara, prove to me you're really a woman. Not cool. Really uncool.
Wouldn't go.
Yeah, really not cool. We don't have to prove anything.
Exactly.
We know who we are inside and out. We don't have to prove anything to anyone.
Good job,
It's
Jeff.
really uncool to ask us to prove our disability one way or another. We don't have to do that.
Exactly. So that brings us to a question of labels. So we know labels are kind of a necessary evil. Humans like to put words to things to describe things. So I'm going to run through real quick a few labels that we often hear associated with disability, and just want to get your yes, no, do you like it, do you not like it, and if you don't like it, why? So I'm going to start with a really simple one, the R word.
No.
Yeah, not a fan.
No, that seems mean.
Yep, it's mean, it's offensive. Richard, you down with the R word?
It's also very rude to say that about someone.
Yep, that is
I would
super rude.
I would generalize that and say it is rude to use intellectual disability or really any other disability as your insult. So don't use the R word, but don't use any other word to replace that. You know, there's been somewhat of a trend, for example, to use autistic in replacement for the R word. That's not any better. That is the exact same thing. Do not punch down. Disability does not make your sick burn. Don't do it.
So what about some of those other, what used to be diagnostic terms that have now become insults? And Jeff, you know what I'm referring to, the I am.
Yeah.
word.
And people watching this may not understand what's being referred to here, so I will unfortunately name them.
I don't either.
Idiot, imbecile, and moron.
Oh.
So these are eugenics era diagnostic terms. So what that means is these are terms that used to refer to intellectual disability, and in the era that they were used, were generally used to make decisions about who had a right to live in society and who was under threat to be thrown in an institution and have horrible things done. So if you wouldn't use the R word, please don't use those words.
Yes.
What about just using intellectual or developmental disability? Not as an insult, but just as a label. You like it?
I would rather have that said about me than anything else, because that's true. That's who I am. It's not gonna hurt my feelings, unlike all of the other ones that will hurt my feelings, because that's not who I am. I am intellectually disabled, but that's what makes me me. I'm not a moron or retarded or anything like that that people throw at me all the time. Yes, I do have a different way of thinking about things, and it takes me longer to process things than other people do. But that's just who I am and what I have to live with on a daily basis. And I'm trying to figure out the best way to live my life. And for me, the best way to do that is to just try and ignore people that want to bring me down, even if they're in my family, and just listen to people that want to bring me up and praise me instead.
Yeah.
And I struggle with that every single day, but I'm trying to be proud of who I am and learn what my disability is and what my strengths and weaknesses are. And if I can try and learn something that is a weakness for me and turn it into a strength, that's what I'm going to try and do. But if you keep throwing these labels, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, then I'm more inclined to believe you and instead of trying to pick myself up, I'm just going to be like, oh yeah, throw myself into a pity hole instead of trying to climb out of that hole and be like, I'm better than that. I know I am. That's what I'm trying to work on right now, telling myself I'm better than what society thinks of me. And it's really hard.
I'm down with developmental disability. I identify with that.
Mm.
Okay.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
say something.
What was that, Richard?
I want to say, please, man that door, go please. Can you send the door? Go please.
Yeah, we can send this to the board.
If it's being recorded. So what about disability specific labels? So like autistic or dyslexic? How do you feel about those?
Well, that's who I am, so I don't feel bad about that because that's who I am. I'm dyslexic.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, go please.
Disability is not a dirty word, and neither should be, you know, as long as it's done within respect, naming the disability, that's not something I feel squeamish about. So, and as part of that, you know, I prefer autistic myself over person first language because person first language implies that disability is a dirty word. It implies that I should feel not want to associate the disability.
Yeah.
So I personally prefer identity first language, so identifying as autistic rather than person with, and I'm very okay with
Oh.
identifying as autistic. Unless you're a jerk.
Do other people have a preference on person first or identity first? People tend to have different preferences. Anybody else have a one way or the other that they
What?
prefer?
Do people
Melissa, do you
prefer
prefer-
person with a disability or disabled?
I think disabled would sound better.
Richard?
Why?
Do you prefer person with a disability or disabled?
Disabled.
Either one?
Either one? Okay.
Will please, Jeff?
What do you mean, Jeff?
Well, so there's some people that have preferences for person first language. So they don't want to be called disabled. They want to be called a person with a disability. Do you have a preference?
I disabled.
You like disabled?
Disabled?
I may be rubbing off on a bunch of you because I'm fairly militant about this.
Well,
But there are people
I-
out there that do prefer person first language.
well, I haven't really heard person first language until just now. So I guess I would be okay with either one of them as long as it wasn't negative.
Sure.
Right. That makes sense. What about high functioning, low functioning?
What do you think?
What do I mean? Sometimes people will use the terms high functioning and low functioning to try to distinguish between the level of support needs that somebody with a disability might have.
I have a disability.
Mhm.
Yep. And some people don't want to just say, you know, people with disabilities. They want to, you know, try to chop it up into a more specific level.
A lot of people think that I am high disability just because they can't physically see my disability. And no, I'm not that way, and I'm not low either. I'm just like right in the middle of both of them. And I don't like when people assume that just because I'm in the middle or I'm a little bit higher than what I think that everything that disabled people get should be taken away from me because I can function without it. And no, I cannot function without the benefits that I get right now. I wouldn't know where to turn or who to turn to if it was all of a sudden taken away from me, because I need this, because for the first time, I have to learn how to cook for myself. I have to learn how to shop for myself. I have to learn how to make sure all my bills are on time and I still have money in my account all by myself for the first time ever. And it's hard. And I need help from community connections and all the places I get help from. If I didn't have that help, I would definitely be more towards, why am I even here? I probably would have more thoughts of, well, then I should just go see my grandmother in heaven because I'm not getting the help I need here on earth. And I know it's bad to say that, but that's how I feel if my things were taken away from me right now.
Yeah, and that's a common saying in the advocacy world is that if they, I'll come back to you, Richard, in just a second. Is it okay if I finish the thought?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ahead.
Thanks, Richard. So a common saying is, if they call you high functioning, your challenges are ignored, your impairments are ignored. If they call you low functioning, your strengths are ignored. And there is almost no time ever that somebody is using one of those phrases to actually see you as a person. It's always to shove you in a box. And some of those can be really insulting boxes. Like every single time somebody has, said, and I've been called both of those things. Every single time somebody's told me, you're so high functioning, it basically means I expected nothing of you and you exceeded my expectations. And like calling a human being low functioning, words that objectively mean barely working or almost broken, how dare you? Stop. Just instead of doing that, I would strongly recommend just describe somebody's support needs if you need to do that. Just talk, we would much rather prefer an objective conversation about what things we need help with rather than things that are almost always dismissive. So, Richard, what were you going to say?
It sounds more like a judgment. You want to say something to all the board members?
Can you do that?
Yes, you can do that. You want to do that right now?
Yeah.
Okay, you can do that, and then we'll wrap up with our last question.
Hey, I'm doing it, but hi.
Richard says hi, and you are doing this, aren't you?
Yeah.
We're so glad you're with us today.
Rocking it.
Yeah. So that is a great segue to why we invited, strong-armed, begged this specific group of people to be with us today, because we know that you are all disability activists and advocates in our communities. And so I wanted to give the opportunity for you each to share what you're really advocating for in your communities. What's really important that you feel like you're fighting for, trying to make changes around.
I hope you like it.
I think everybody watching this likes it, Richard.
Yep.
Will do. Definitely. Alyssa, what do you think? What do you do as an advocate?
I help other people.
Right on. You do.
Everybody.
Richard does help everybody.
Mhm.
Yep.
Nice.
A lot of what I'm focused on advocacy right now is stuff like this, platforming other people. It's really important. I know through my experience how the power of our voice, and I know the more people we elevate that can be heard and get talking, the more things are going to change for us. So that's a lot of what I'm about right now.
I see that.
Yeah.
Yep. Richard's involved in many of the same things. Yeah. How about Katie?
I'm really trying to be an advocate for getting my sidewalks fixed where I live, because they are so badly uneven that my friend Vincent, who's in a wheelchair, he gets stuck all the time so badly because one side will be level and the other side will be up so high that if he doesn't realize that it's up so high, he almost flipped his wheelchair, and thank goodness he has a seatbelt, or he would have fallen and hurt himself, and then his wheelchair would have fallen on top of him. And I've fallen and actually almost broke my ankle one time because of how different the sidewalks are. Some are perfectly fine, others are too high, and then some go from too high to perfectly fine again. And if I'm not literally watching the ground as I'm walking, I will hurt myself, and I have almost hurt myself to the point to where I needed to get a surgery to fix my ankle or something. And I've been trying to work with Martha at Southwest SWI to get the sidewalks fixed, but I haven't had time or she hasn't had time. And I complained a lot about by Mongolian and Irie over by Walmart that they need to fix those potholes because somebody's going to get severely hurt. And I don't know if people heard me or not, but that section of the street there is caution taped off, and people are actually working to tear it up and fix the potholes. So I think from me saying it, and my friends are saying it, and somebody important is hearing us say it, I think I put that into motion and got those potholes fixed. But I'm not sure if it was just me and my friends and the person overhearing us, the right person overhearing us, or if it was just a bunch of people complaining about that those potholes are finally getting fixed.
That is so awesome, Katie. And yeah, sometimes it does take multiple voices, but if none of those voices spoke up, then it would never happen. So I am just so impressed with all the work you're doing. Advocacy is hard work. It's not easy. And
no, it's not.
Yeah.
So
it may be really hard work and not easy, but when you get something accomplished, it is so, it just takes my breath away when something finally gets accomplished, because it's like, whoa. I made a little bit of a change in the world when society says because I'm dyslexic that I'm not going to be able to change the world, and I just did a little bit. I'm getting the potholes fixed.
So one thing I wanted to point out is a few months ago, the advocacy class, Community Connections advocacy class, as a class called the governor's office to ask that people with disabilities in home and community-based services be made eligible for the vaccine shots, because a lot of people providing support were being cleared to sign up for shots, but the actual people they were working for were not. 4 days later, 4 days after making that call, that got changed. And Governor Polis walked to the podium and announced that people in home and community-based services could go get shots.
They could call.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is awesome.
And the COVID vaccine has gotten all the way up to Canada now, because my Aunt Blue and my Aunt Trish got their first shots just a couple of days ago. So the vaccine finally made it to Canada.
Oh. Well, that is the end of our official questions and probably the end of our time today. Thank you all so much for making this time and participating, and for all that you've shared today. It was really educational. I learned a lot. I really appreciated what everyone had to share.